I'm Brittany. I'm a licensed elementary school teacher, but right now I'm staying home with my two littles to homeschool them and run my business. And today we're going to talk about 5 things to avoid when choosing picture books for your children. Okay, so there are countless picture books out in the world, and no one loves books more than I do. I know that sounds, I mean, every book lover says that, but I love children's books, and I'm really having a hard time right now not being able to go to the library because, I mean, you go into the library and it's like just this sense of peace. You're just surrounded by knowledge and words and pictures and so much opportunity. And right now I'm kind of dying. In fact, I made the mistake. It wasn't a mistake, but I laughed because I went to an Usborne book party last night, and I never, ever go to those because I know my weakness. It's like inviting an addict to a party where you're serving whatever they're addicted to and asking them to pay money for it because they will. That's exactly what it is, because I am addicted to books. And we've been going on a major decluttering spree since we moved. We had to do an emergency move that I can go into at another time, but we have gotten rid of literally dozens and dozens of boxes and bags, and the house feels so much better because of it. But I was working on our science unit for the month, which we're doing reptiles, because my kids are little. I let them choose whatever they want to study, because really, I mean, they're 2 and 5. Everything is interesting. So I let them pick, and we did reptiles, and I realized I don't have nearly as many reptile books as I thought I did. We have a gazillion books about animals, but not very many on reptiles. And so I went to this Usborne party last night and ended up ordering like $106 worth of stuff before shipping and taxes. But anyways, yeah, so I love books, and I will preface that. And I also want to say before I begin this that if your child is someone who has a hard time reading and doesn't like reading, but they have one particular thing they like to read, you need to go with that. You need to find what works for your family. And you know, what works for my family won't always work for your family. But I will say, as an educator, there are certain kinds of picture books that are better quality and are better for children than others. Now, am I saying you only read books that have the Caldecott Award to your children? No. There are many books that are wonderful that have no awards. But today we're going to talk about 5 kinds of books, and I should also say, maybe you don't have to avoid these all the time. I know I don't. I break these rules. But a lot of times we can fall into pits and say, oh yeah, whatever you want, read that. But I think as adults, as parents, we need to be intentional with what literature we're introducing our children to. And they're going to learn to value what we do. And so it's important to instill certain levels of expectation, I suppose, for children as they get older, because we know what's better for them than they do. Now, of course, if your kid runs over and finds, like my son loves this cheap little How to Train Your Dragon book. It is not wonderfully written. It's just literally they took one of the stories from How to Train Your Dragon and threw it in there, and it's not wonderfully written, and it's literally just copy paste from the movie. Is it high quality? No, but my 2-year-old loves it, and I'm not going to take it away from him. That said, I'm not going to let him only read How to Train Your Dragon cheap knockoff books. Okay, so thing number 1 that you need to be aware of when you're picking books for your children. Picture books. We're talking about picture books today, not so much chapter books, although I will bring one of those in, mostly picture books for now, are overly busy illustrations. I'm sure you've seen some of these. Not a lot, but there are some illustrators who they want to put in abstract art into children's books, and sometimes it works, but sometimes it's way too much. Children are still learning how to process information, and if you give them too much of it, they can't find a place to hook onto. They can't find a place to focus on. And there are some books that I want to have a seizure when I look at them, because there are 5 million colors and very strange shapes, and it doesn't have a focal point. I have a rule of thumb for this. My rule of thumb is it can have as many colors as imaginable. I love colors. I love colorful books. And it can have as many of them as the illustrator wants to throw in there, as long as the text is easily readable. And I'm going to give examples of good books who do these things well, as opposed to ones I don't like. I'm going to bring in ones that give examples of what books should be. Okay, so for example, this book, Pop. My kids love this book. They love this book, and it's kind of a random book. I only picked it because my son is obsessed with bubbles. We found it at the library, and they loved it so much that my mom got it for my son for Christmas. Lots and lots and lots of pictures, but text is easily readable. The character is easy to define. We know where the focal point is for the picture. Once again, easy text. Once again, not all traditional picture books have frames like this, but it works because in each frame you know where you're supposed to be looking. And again, the text is easy to find. And the pictures are just phenomenal. Like this picture, there's I think this is an F-16. Yeah, F-16, which my son is obsessed with anything that moves. And again, just beautiful pictures, bright pictures, but it's easy to find those focal points. So yeah, this is called Pop by Jason Carter Eaton, illustrated by Matt Rockefeller. Beautiful book. And I will have the links to these on my blog post, so you can find those if you decide you want to look them up or order them, or try to get them from the library. If yours is open. I miss my library. Okay, we have a phenomenal kids library, and I'm just dying because we can't use it. This one, if anything screams busy, this is it. But my kids love these. They have the Seymour Simon books. This is Scholastic. They have Seymour Simon. Walter Wick does the Seymour Simon books, I think, as well. They have the I Spy books. They're kind of the same thing. So yes, they're extremely busy because the whole everything's full. Oh, look, the page my son ripped out. We're hoping my daughter doesn't figure that out. It's her book. But once again, you have these pictures. There are focal points, and the whole thing is the eye is drawn to those focal points naturally, but then the eye gets to wander, and you can actually teach your children how to look in the details, which is one of the reasons I love these books, is how to look in the details. The beauties in the details. And then they've got the list of things you're supposed to find that are hidden in the pictures. But you can't show your children how to look at details if they don't know where to look first, because they don't know what a detail is. So giving them books that, again, they can be very busy. They just need to have focal points. They need to be easy to look at without, your eyes hurting. Because I've literally looked at picture books where my eyes hurt after looking at them. So yes, these are phenomenal. Okay, thing number 2, poor rhyming and rhythm. So a number of publishers will, and I say this as an author because I'm an author for adults and I'm an author for children. Some publishing houses I learned I actually learned this through, first time I was really introduced to it, I guess, was it but the movie Elf, which is a weird place, but then you go to the bookstore and you realize that it actually happens, where they have their own groups of writers that are supposed to put together books that will sell, and sell for children in particular. And that's not bad in and of itself if they do it well, because many of them are well done, but so many of the ones that you will find, you can tell are not done by educators, and especially when they're using text that doesn't match the pictures, especially for young children, really, really young children, pre-readers, kiddos like my little 2-year-old. You'll read the words out loud, and they don't have a rhythm and they don't have a rhyme, and there's no comfortable way to say them. And you can usually find this by reading it out loud. And so yeah, if you're looking to find a book that rhymes, make sure it actually rhymes before you buy it for your child. Or if you're at the library, just whisper it to yourself, because you can tell when you read a book out loud if it's comfortable to read. And if it's comfortable for you to read, it will be comfortable for them to listen. And you want to give them good examples of how text or of how speech should flow. And it's not going to flow if the rhymes are bad. And believe it or not, they have a number of books that the rhymes are terrible. I don't know how they get them out. I don't know how they get past the editor, but they do. Now, a good example, and I've used this book before because I love it, is Steam Train, Dream Train. This author and illustrator, they also do the Good Night construction site books, which both my kids loved. The rhymes in here are just incredibly beautiful, and they just roll off the tongue. And the illustrations are gorgeous too. I have a favorite, the ice cream shop one. I have a favorite page. See if I can find it. Okay. The reefer car is snug and cold. Its chili box can safely hold frozen treats for every stop, like a rolling ice cream shop. I mean, it's gentle and harmonious, and it just sounds lovely, and it feels lovely. So great book. Sherry Dusky Rinker and Tom Lichtenheld. But yes, beautiful book. So before you get a book, you flip through and you see it rhymes, just read a few sentences to yourself and think, does this actually flow? And again, it's not like you can't read those other books to your kids. I have, but if you're really trying to be intentional with what you choose, you want to make sure you get good stuff in there too. Okay, let's see. Okay, I talked a little bit about this earlier. Sorry, I've got a list because I can't remember my name today. Only using movie recap books. I told you about my son's love for the How to Train Your Dragon books. They have a million of the book out there that you go in, they have the Disney version or the DreamWorks. The movie versions of the books. And I will say my daughter has a lot of those. Or books that go with movies, but a lot of them are really poorly done. They leave out a lot of details. They don't give you good, I'm sorry, what's the word I'm looking for? I told you my brain is shot today. They don't always give good details. They sometimes give incorrect details. Sometimes they skip whole sections and you're left with like a gap in the story that doesn't make sense. So I'm not saying you can't read these, because sometimes they're a great way to get kids interested in books, particularly kiddos who maybe struggle with learning or have an ASD, who have they perseverate on certain things and they want to know everything there is to know about that subject. I'm not saying don't do this, but what I'm saying is choose your books wisely. And a good example of this, my mother-in-law bought this for my kids, Olaf's Night Before Christmas. This book is adorable, and it actually came with a CD to read, to stick in, and you can, hear the story out loud. The rhyming, I love rhyming. The rhyming is just absolutely beautiful, and it's adorable. Straight toward the castle the flying sled came, while the man, was it Kristoff, called out some strange names. And it's from Olaf's point of view. And this is a beautifully done book. So if you're looking for a good Christmas book, this is beautifully done. But just, again, flip the book open before you buy it. Look at it. If you're shopping on Amazon, usually you can do a peek inside and just look at the first few pages. But if you can, try to pick books that have a higher quality of storytelling than, again, the ones. And something some of my author friends and I noticed is that Disney, if they're putting out a book before the movie comes out, the book will only tell half the story. My friend bought her daughter, her 4-year-old, a Frozen 2 book, and for a couple weeks, like 2 weeks before the movie came out, and it stopped in the middle of the story and was like, well, will Anna and Elsa, win? We'll have to find out. That was the end of the book. She was not happy. I wouldn't have been either. So, again, flip through the book, see if it's something that actually is a good story that would benefit your children. Is it something that will, does it have a good plot? And we'll be touching on this later with other types of books. But, again, if you're doing the movie books, just before you buy, because there are so many, there are better quality ones. This Frozen book might be better than that Frozen book. So just glance at them and make sure they have an ending. And, just read them out loud a bit to yourself and see, does this work well? Is this high quality, or is this something that they literally wrote in, half a day and then shoved out on the printer? Because it does happen. I don't know about their time, but it seems like you literally could write these things in half a day and shove them in the printer. Okay, 4. This one might be a bit of a touchy subject, and again, take this all with a grain of salt. This depends on your family, what you believe, what you think your kids are ready for, because different kids are ready for different things at different times. But children in general are not capable of thinking abstractly until they're 8 years old. By abstractly, I mean concepts that are not concrete. So talking about, when grandma went to the store today and they ran out of apples, that's concrete. Talking about my daughter has a book she loves called I Really Want to Eat a Child. This is the weirdest book in the world and she loves it. It's a little baby alligator who wants to eat a child and isn't big enough. The little girl laughs and throws him back in the water. It's funny. It's silly, but concrete things that actually exist. When you move into things like ideas, concepts, race, gender, as far as just, gender roles, gender equality, that kind of stuff, that is not concrete, that is abstract. And no matter how your family wants to tackle it, young children are generally not ready before the age of 8. Now, that doesn't mean you can't discuss things with them, because I've discussed race with my daughter. She asked me one time, why does God make people different colors? And we talked about how, God made the human race beautiful and he's given it lots of variety, and it would be boring if we all looked the same. But even that was a bit of a stretch for her. She kind of was like, I don't think she quite got where I was going with that, but we've talked about it several times. But what I'm saying is kids generally aren't ready to absorb political stances the way adults are, or even older children. And the other thing is politics can get very negative. Especially when you're talking about hot button issues. I'm very passionate about certain political stances, but that doesn't mean my child is ready to interpret them. So what I've chosen to do for my daughter is, instead of, talking, and I will say also the reason I say this is it's becoming more it's becoming more in vogue to, write political books for children. They're not ready. They actually have a political section for, hey you, I'm doing a video. They actually have a political section at our old kids library. Kids aren't ready for that. Not the ones who are still in little bitty picture books. The kids who are reading this are not ready for political stances yet. But that doesn't mean that children aren't able to understand the basic concepts of being kind and bullying. And rather than get into the abstract discussion with children over arguments that politicians have, because again, children are not ready, we need to introduce them to books that emphasize the positive parts of, the reverse of those things that we want to fight against. This is one of my favorite books that my daughter has. It's called My Best Friend, and it's about a little girl who desperately wants to be best friends with this older girl. And let's see, she's back here. And the older girl won't give her the time of day until her other friend is gone. And then she'll kind of play with her, and then as soon as her friend comes back, she leaves her in the dust and makes fun of her. And there's another little girl who wants to be her friend. And at first the main character, is honed in on this older girl. But as the story goes, she starts to realize that maybe this other little girl is a good friend. And so this book is it's phenomenal. I just can't say enough good things about this book, but it focuses on friendship and what it feels like to be hurt and what it feels like to be left out. And those will set the stage for whenever your children are ready to discuss political issues, is really getting to the heart of, showing kindness to others and the worth of other humans. So books like that deal with things on more of a level that children are familiar with. Kids are not going to understand the argument that, senators had, but they will understand what it means to feel left out. And so books like this are fantastic. This one's kind of funny, and it's got great rhyming again. Mean Jean, the Recess Queen. And it's about, Mean Jean beats all the kids up, and she steals their balls and, runs over everyone at recess. And there's this little girl who doesn't listen to her. She doesn't let her bully her, but then she goes back and she's kind to the bully. And again, it's bringing things down to a level children can relate to personally. Let's see. Another aspect would be introducing children to other cultures. not in a comparative way, not saying this culture is better than that or this culture thinks they're better than that one. Instead, just making them aware that there are other people in the world who live differently from them. And children who read often are actually more empathetic than children who don't, because they are introduced to children or to other points of view and other ways of life from around the world. They're able to see that the world goes beyond their little sphere. This is, and we can do it with time. So going back, reading books about people from a long time ago. We can do that with, books about other cultures. I brought it up before. Where is that book? Hold on. Found it. Okay. My Piles and Piles of Coins. Talua M. Malel. I hope I didn't butcher the poor author's name, but this isn't even a book about being kind. This is a book about a little boy who wants to save up to buy a bicycle so he can help his mother. But it's a story that takes place in Africa. So, assuming you're not from this part of Africa, I mean, if you are, I'm sure there are other cultures you can explore. But, there's a busy marketplace, and we get to see people, with bags of food open and baskets, and his mother carries her food on her head, which is not something, for example, my kids would be very familiar with. But it's a way to show children that there are other ways of life, and it's kind of fun to discuss that kind of stuff with them. And you can do all sorts of exploration. You can find documentaries, other books if your kids particularly want to know about another culture, another part of the world. But it's a great way of creating awareness. Another one, now this is a chapter book, I know, but Little House on the Prairie, I'm reading with my kids right now, and there has been an outcry against the Little House books because of the way that Laura's Ma, her mother, reacts to the Native Americans. And there is an African American doctor in here who, maybe he's in the other one. I think he might be on the banks of Plum Creek later in the series. But the way that they're first described, but instead of banning it from my house, I have taken it as an opportunity to discuss with my daughter, is this a really fair way to view people? Just because they're different from us, does that mean that they're automatically bad? Does that mean we automatically have to be afraid of them? What happened, like in the I think it's on the banks of Plum Creek, when I think the family gets, they get one of those illnesses from mosquito. I want to say typhoid fever, but no, it's not that one. I know it's not that one. I told you my brain is blanking out today, but there's an African American doctor who comes and saves the family, and Laura begins to see that the way she thought of someone in the beginning, when she first sees him, she's afraid, but then she finds out he's very kind and he saved their lives. And so it's a great way to talk about other people, and to, again, just create that awareness without bringing in the negativity of politics for young children who aren't ready to process that kind of abstract thought yet. Okay, let's see. Number 5, books with poor plots and cause and effect relationships. I'm pretty sure you've seen them before because there are unfortunately too many books that fit this. There are so many really just bad books out there, unfortunately. And again, I think a lot of this comes from publishing companies that are trying to push out books, the ones that actually come from the publishing companies that are trying to push out books, and they want to make money fast. And nothing's wrong with making money as an author. That's my job. I want to make money as an author. But going through and really finding books that have quality plot, that have good cause and effect relationships, that build character. This is, there are a lot of books out there, unfortunately, more than I wish. But for all of those, there are even more good books. So, it's easy to associate that with cheap fairy tales or fiction stories, because usually they are fiction. But this is a good example. This is Johnny Appleseed, and this is the one who's done by Steve Kellogg. Beautiful book, beautiful illustrations, and it has a lovely story progression throughout the book. And I say this because I've written a children's book and I'm in the process of writing several more. This is the one that I wrote. I did a retelling of Beauty and the Beast for kids. I'm in the middle of doing Cinderella right now, or starting Cinderella right now. I usually retell fairy tales for adults, but I have to say this retelling this book was harder than I expected. And I say this because any author who's worth looking into is going to sit and they're going to actually focus on the plot, and they're going to change things, and they're going to try to make, you know, good character decisions and build character. And it was hard. It was hard to write this book. The original Beauty and the Beast is over 100 pages. And so my illustrator and I really had to figure out, you know, where we were getting the ideas and what we were putting into them. And it would have been very easy to kind of make this a Disney knockoff. And, you know, the way the ones that you find at the dollar store do. And again, this is not to say you need to buy my book. This is just to give you an example of, as an author, it is not easy to write a good book. And if it's a good book, it will have actually taken some thought and ingenuity from the author. And it shouldn't be just a cheap version of everything else you find out there. So I guess I'm saying, if you can, try to avoid the dollar store versions. I'm sure not all dollar store versions are terrible, but I've seen a lot that are. So just, you know, when again, it all comes down to being intentional. When you're picking out literature for your children, that doesn't mean ban all the books that don't have Caldecott awards or that aren't perfect. It just means if your kid goes after some cheap knockoff of, you know, Cinderella or How to Train Your Dragon, for that book that they read, make sure they read a good one as well. I would love to hear some of your favorite book recommendations. You know, comment in the video, comment on my website, on my blog, Brittany.Pearl, that's P-E-R-L. I'm sorry, BrittanyPearl.com. You can email me at Brittany.Pearl.teach@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Like this video, subscribe so that you can keep up with new videos in the future. And I hope to get to know you in the near future. All right, have a great weekend.